the crowd, or rather preparing for the main event that's going to be taking place. I believe we have, and you can see that on the screen. But joining me on set here, we have Honorable Kipruto Arap Kirwa, who was an assistant minister during the time of Mois, I believe, in agriculture. But maybe just to start with your memory of Mzee Mois, you're one who worked with him and worked under him. Your memory of him.
Well, thank you, Michael Kitonga, for this opportunity. Mzee was many things in one. He was a father, a leader, a good Christian. At the same time, somebody who was a stickler for time. Anytime he announced that he was going to be in a particular place at 10 o'clock, exactly 5 minutes to 10 or at 10, he would be there promptly. Number two, he was very strict and disciplined in whatever he said. And a very good timekeeper, as I've said, and somebody who did a lot of consultation. And he was very fond of traveling by road to ensure that wherever he reached, he was going to say, to greet people. And every journey of his was a consultative mission.
That was something unique about him, that he often would travel by road and made very many stops.
Yes, those stops are very useful because he was able to interact with the heartbeat of the nation by talking to the people, ordinary people, teachers, students, and any time we knew he was passing, we would make sure that we were strategically placed on the road to say hi to him. And once in a while, he would be able to leave us with 1 or 2 loaves of bread for 1 week or 2.
That probably explains the love that we see here. I mean, are you surprised that this stadium, it is now just about 7:10, and we can see it's filling up. There's every indication that it's going to be fully packed. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me because he was a man of the people, and we're also dealing with a regime that is friendly to him. That's why there's been a lot of support, eulogy, and also a lot of goodwill from the public and also from the government.
All right, now Mois, of course, was also known for his generosity.
Yeah.
As we've talked to Kenyans, one of the things that has stood out and many remember is Maziwa ya Nyayo. But I'm sure even as you're working in the cabinet, what kind of a man was he to interact with on a one-on-one?
He was somebody who could come down to your level and consult with you on a number of issues. And I found him also very decisive whenever it came to decision making. Once you agreed on a certain course of action, you would be able to make prompt decision and ensure that implementation is done. Number two, anytime during campaigns, because I campaigned with him for 3 elections, and anytime you became the candidate of the party, he made sure that he gave you all the support, all the advice. From time to time, he would call you to State House or wherever he was and give you some of the areas that one needed to take care of as a candidate of the party for purposes of winning that particular election. Yeah.
You mentioned that he was a stickler for time, and that has been mentioned by quite a number of people. Is it true that his meetings began very early every day?
I remember one morning we went to Cabernet Gardens with the late Mactor at 5 o'clock, and we found him already awake at 5 a.m. in the morning. And we found him already awake and ready for us. We had a cup of tea. Then he said he was going to meet other people in State House at about 6:30. So it meant the morning hours he spent a lot on consultation from time to time, whether it was Cabernet Gardens, whether it was State House Nakuru, whether it was State House Nairobi or Kabarak home. His was to consult with people, and he had regular meetings with members of the public, opinion leaders, and also members of parliament. Yes.
All right. Now, one of the other things that I remember that many people talked about and said about him, and maybe you let us know if this is true, it's the 1 o'clock news. Remember that it was said that there are quite a number of leaders who would be listening to the 1 o'clock news, which for him was very, crucial, and would find out that they've been fired without knowing. They would actually find out like everybody else. Is this true?
Incidentally, I was also fired at 1 o'clock news.
So you're one who had that experience. Talk us through that experience.
No, it's a very interesting experience. Remember that time, especially the formative years of his regime, it was only one broadcaster,
Correct.
KBC.
KBC at that time.
At that particular time. And KBC News was very important. and almost every minister or every assistant minister had a small radio to himself to make sure that he can take aside and be able to
with
what is happening. And if his name is missing, then he gets back to the car. Because quite a number of them would get fired at 1 o'clock. And if somebody was asleep in the car, he would be informed by his bodyguard that the situation has changed and the flag has to be removed from the car if you are a minister.
Was it that dramatic? Because, you know, people normally say it in jest or in joking, that you would be fired and the driver would now tell you, sir, I'll just take you to wherever you're dropping off, and after that, I have to be assigned another duty. Is that true?
Well, it depends on the rationality of the moment. Because you see, once you are fired at that particular time, you became almost a pariah.
Right.
And therefore, it was impossible for anybody to want to associate with you.
Including even your very aides.
Even your own driver, because he's no longer your driver.
Right.
Because you immediately become a former minister or a former so-and-so, whatever the position is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember what particularly made you get fired at that time?
Well, we were agitating for the formation of another party other than KANU, and we had formed the UDM with a number of members of parliament, including the current deputy president, Cyrus Jirongo, and a number of other individuals that we were in parliament, and we felt KANU was no longer representing our view. And we used to have a lot of consultations in my office. And I think the president realized this office is now being used to undermine the very foundation of that particular office. So he gave me marching orders on the 27th of May, 1998, having appointed me twice in the same docket.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on now, and of course, Mois then at some point became a very, he kind of not really changed character, but one thing that stands out is the time that he apologized. And he said that if I have wronged anybody, I am sorry. And if I have said anything that, has offended anyone, I'm sorry. Was that something that you'd have said was out of character? Because preview to that, it was a Mois who was very stern, very strict, almost standing on the verge of, if you really cannot, stand the fire, get out of the kitchen.
I know many people don't know President Mois, the person. He had a very tough exterior, but very soft interior, in the sense that he never ceased to be a Christian throughout his life, throughout his presidency. So he was firm because he wanted a discipline and people to take instructions as they were and ensure that you do not go against the grain. But in his private capacity, he is somebody who understood and had strong feelings about those who are disadvantaged in society. So anytime, even when he made that particular statement, I was not surprised, but of course I was humbled by the fact that somebody who has been so powerful for more than 40 years in the landscape of Kenya had the humility to to make that particular statement. And that makes me wonder, why are we still vilifying somebody who has rested? Why don't we allow him to rest and be with his maker?
Right. Now, the Nyayo philosophy, peace, love, and unity, something that he spoke about. He was very consistent about it. And even from his demeanor and his body language, we would like to believe that this is something that he held very dear. What do you feel has stopped us from achieving that, if at all we haven't achieved it? Peace, love, and unity.
Well, Mois is a product of the first generation of politicians, people who believed in this country. They were genuine patriots. But increasingly, because of scarcity of resources, we've decided to go tribal as a way of amalgamating the resources within our reach. And we have made tribe the rallying call for many political statements that we make as a nation. We have not achieved it, but it is work in progress. I strongly believe that such a moment as we celebrate the lives and times of President Mois, we should be able to ask ourselves, do serious soul searching. Why are we differing as a nation, and yet we have so many similarities than the differences that set us apart. Yeah.
Now, as a politician who was, right in the cabinet at that time during Mois' time, now you have the privilege, if I can call it that, of looking from the outside and seeing how things are going. What do you feel are some of the things that we need to possibly bring back on track as per Mois' philosophy of peace, love, and unity for us to ensure that we have a country that our forefathers dreamt about?
Let leaders in whatever station in life realize that they are not serving their own community, they are serving the entire nation. Secondly, it is good to have some serious discipline and coordination of government business. I remember we used to have what we call collective responsibility, where each member of the cabinet ensured that he covers for the colleague who may not be there in parliament or in any other forum. Ministers should not be disagreeing in public because it makes them look bad and it doesn't show the unity in government. We expect less and less of the publicity that has been going on, that the ruling party is split. Because I may not be a member of the ruling party, but I'm concerned because that's the party that has the reins of power as we talk today. And we need to see more of unity as we go towards the next general election. And let elections not divide us. Let them be just an event, and the rest should be the processes of building a united country.
All right. Now, there are those who feel that Kenya is forever almost chasing a dream that we never seem to be catching. During the time of Mzee Kenyatta, the founding fathers of this nation, they had a fallout with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, and that maybe began, was a beginning of something. But at some point, they made amends, and there was what we'd call now a handshake. Move forward, and we have Kibaki also falling out with Raila. There was a handshake. Now we have Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila also having a handshake. Do you feel like we're forever chasing a dream that we never seem to be catching, despite the fact that there seem to be moments where there is moments of reckoning, if I would call them that, where leaders come together and say, look, for the sake of this country, let us make amends?
I think we should inculcate in Kenyans, especially at the early stage, the need for patriotic principles and values. We need to look for national cohesion in whatever capacity that we are in. That's the only way we can ensure that we are no longer dealing with issues of tribes, but we are dealing with issues of individuals who merit positions they hold. Let us be more cohesive in terms of reaching out to our opponents, and we should not consider them as our opponents because at the end of the day, we are all Kenyans.
We are all Kenyans. Now, Moi did call himself, and many did agree with him, that he was the professor of politics. At one time, he also said that he's able to see very far while he's still seated. And looking at it now with hindsight, there could be a lot of truth in that. I remember the time he asked Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta to stand up, and he said, this is the man that I see can take over this country. At that time, it felt, and many would have thought that that was a far-fetched dream because Uhuru was not in the limelight, politically speaking. Do you agree with Moi that he had foresight? Are there things that he was able to see that possibly are playing out now?
Yes, I can say this without any fear of contradiction, Michael, that Moi was a manager of transition. Remember, he was able to transit from the colonial system to newly independent Kenya. And in his wisdom, they ensured with the late President Kenyatta that they unite the country by ensuring that we move to a phase of one-party system at the beginning. And if there was democracy within the party, I don't think one-party system would have been a problem. Subsequent to that, the transition from Mzee Kenyatta to President Moi in 1978 was a watershed. It is something that many of us did not expect that Kenya will be the same again. But he was able to manage the transition, allow those who disagreed with him to suffer the natural attrition process without a lot of retribution. Although some of them ran out of the country for fear of that, but President Moi ensured that things were all okay. The 82 coup was almost a shaker to his regime, to the foundation, but he was also able to transit and also allow the due process to take place for those who might have been found on the other side of things. And the last transition, or the second last transition, was the 1991, where he ushered in multipartyism, because there was agitation all over the world and of course within the country about the needs for multi-party society. He was able to midwife that process effectively. Well, almost 60% of Kenyans voted against him, but he still retained power because the constitutional arrangement at that time was okay. But the final and the most important transition that I really give him a lot of credit is to hand over to NAC in Uhuru Park in 2002 at the end of the year. That was something because he came to a crowd that was visibly hostile to him, but he braved it. I know many of his ministers ran away when he left the State House to come and hand over to President Kibaki.
Right.
That was something befitting a man of his stature.
Absolutely, a very courageous leader he was. We're coming to you live from the Nyayo National Stadium, where I can now tell you that it's almost 2/3 full. The capacity is 30,000, and I have no doubt that by the time this event starts in another 2.5 hours or so, it is likely to be full. I'd like to now hand over back to you, Trix, in the studio, just to continue the conversation as we continue to prepare and just get ready for a historic event that's going to be taking place. This is the memorial service of the second president of this great republic, that's Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, which is scheduled to begin around 10 o'clock. But for now, let's get back to the studio before we come back and continue the conversation from right here